Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area with everything you need to make sure that your home looks good, works well, and is able to handle a tropical storm or a hurricane. And they've got all those supplies that you need to get you through any kind of adverse weather. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. OmniTrueValue.com is the website. I waited today until mid-afternoon to do Weather in 5 because I wanted to get a good feel for what the dayside models were doing. We, of course, have Hurricane Fiona moving northward, a Category 4 hurricane with top winds at 130 miles an hour. There hasn't been an aircraft in there since this morning. We're seeing on the lightning strike map over the visible satellite loop that some thunderstorms are bursting again near the center. So that could be an indication that we may have another leg down in the pressure. In other words, that the storm may intensify a bit more as it moves northward and eventually heads on to the northeast. And here's the full view with respect to the whole tropical Atlantic. You can barely see it in the upper center here, but we have Gaston. We have, of course, we have tropical Hurricane Fiona, and then this new tropical wave that I'm going to talk about here. You can see that part of the upper air circulation that's there, you can tell by the curvature, is actually pretty far south, at least for now, which is probably inhibiting this from developing. But eventually it's going to emerge into the eastern Caribbean Sea. I think once it does that, especially as we head into the weekend, that system is going to develop. So we're going to come back to that in just a bit. So the latest 2 p.m. advisory on Fiona, 25-1, 71-7, 130 mile an hour winds, moving north at 8. We have tropical storm warnings and a hurricane watch up for Bermuda. And it still looks as if the center is going to pass just to the northwest of Bermuda. Maybe they'll get on the very easternmost edge of the core of the hurricane. Hopefully it stays out just to the northeast of them because it's going to hold its labeling as a major hurricane all the way up through the Atlantic. By the way, this is going to mean some big waves developing here, probably starting Thursday night and building on Friday as the hurricane goes by to the east Friday evening from New England on down into the mid-Atlantic states. And then, of course, we continue to look for the likelihood of a pass over eastern Nova Scotia, impacting much of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland with wind and rain. And this still has that signature look of a tropical system gradually transitioning over into a very powerful post-tropical cyclone or an extratropical cyclone. In other words, a storm that you would normally see, the characteristics of a storm you would normally see, a cold core storm up in the northern latitudes. So the folks in the Canadian Maritime provinces have to pay really close attention to this. Meanwhile, just to give you an idea with the intensity models, all in that Cat 4 zone. They start to weaken it after it goes by long past Bermuda. And by the way, this storm could hold on to its strength for a while longer because the ocean water temperatures in the Atlantic continue to remain well above normal. And the hurricane model forecast tracks continue to concentrate on the the easternmost part. Let me correction. The easternmost part of Nova Scotia as far as the track is concerned. And with these cyclones, when they become post-tropical, the heavy rains shift to the west side. The strongest winds wind up being east of the center. And then, of course, you've got the fact that this thing will be moving at about 50 or 60 miles an hour at that point. Now, let's look also at the system that's going to be in the Caribbean. These are the forecast model tracks. And they're all pretty consistent, most of them taking it south of Jamaica and then making a turn to the northwest toward western Cuba or even the Yucatan Channel. You've got one outlier now that's further south and west of the others, but the rest of the models are pretty well bunched up. And this track, by the way, is over the next 7 days. So starting this Wednesday morning, when you're looking at these points up as it enters the eastern Gulf of Mexico, that would be next Wednesday morning. And the intensity guidance here, having this gradually develop into a tropical storm over the next 2 or 3 days, and then strengthening it to a hurricane. And we have it also being indicated by the intensity guidance that some of the models, actually 4 of them out of the 5, make it another major hurricane. So let's roll through what plays out locally, weather-wise. And of course, we've got a cold front that's coming through. The hurricane itself is actually going to cause this cold front to get hung up for just a little bit. So I'm thinking that the timing of that front will probably be sometime during tomorrow morning, a little earlier in eastern Pennsylvania, say perhaps around 7 or 8 a.m., and perhaps closer to 10 or 11 a.m. reaching the coast. And I think we're going to see some showers and 1 or 2 thunderstorms with that front as it goes by. And then after that, this big high builds in. You can see where Fiona is offshore as it's passing very close to Bermuda. The gradient here actually is going to be, I wouldn't say tight, but it is going to be tightening up a bit. So look for breezy to occasionally windy conditions developing later Thursday night into Friday morning as temperatures fall. We'll reach our highs of the day early. We'll probably settle into the 60s. By Friday morning, we'll be in the mid-40s to low 50s, and temperatures on Friday, I think upper 50s to mid-60s for the highs will do it. There's the track of the European, where the system is right over the eastern tip of Nova Scotia. The high building near the coast on Saturday. The winds will relax some, and temperatures will be upper 60s to low 70s. And then we have another front that's coming in with another cool air mass behind it. So we could have some rain moving in very late in the afternoon, say in eastern Pennsylvania, and maybe during the evening hours over New Jersey into southern New England and the Hudson Valley. That front plays through on Monday, and then as that next high starts to build in, you'll see that the new system in the Caribbean on the European runs into the Northwest Caribbean as a Category 2 hurricane, and then the European being the furthest to the right of any of these models brings it close to the west coast of Florida. The GFS is a little bit to the west of that, and brings it up more toward the panhandle over time. Look, I'm not telling you anything you can't look for yourself in terms on the maps, which is why I'm just saying it rather than pretending like it's a big secret. Here's what it boils down to for me, from what I've been seeing so far. The models for the last 4 or 5 days have been really locked onto this. The European and the GFS have been virtually identical. The differences have only been in terms of the positioning, where one is further to the west and the other one's a little bit further to the east. What's important is that if this does wind up going into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, the biggest question is going to be, is it going to move west of the Appalachians, or is it going to move east of the Appalachians as it rides up northeastward? Those two types of tracks make a big difference in terms of the kind of weather that you wind up having in the mid-Atlantic states and in the Northeast. If it's east of the Appalachians, it'll be potentially a wind and potentially a lot of heavy rain. If it's west of the Appalachians, you might get some wind, but it'll be, and maybe some rain, but most of the heavier activity would obviously be to the west. It really sort of boils down to that. That would be for the latter part of next week anyway. It's a long way off. And the timing of the upper air, just to really quickly show you this, the timing of the upper air is such that there's a trough that's going to be coming down and picking this up. And if it's the GFS is a little bit faster with this trough moving into the northern plains than the European. The European is faster than the GFS is. This picks it up and lifts it up to the west, and the European does something like this, but it's a little bit further to the east. But I think that's the way to look at it. Figure out Once it gets into the eastern Gulf, which I think it's going to do, then we have to figure out, does it go west of the Appalachians or does it go east of the Appalachians? And you know what? We got about 8 or 9 days to figure that out. So in the meantime, just enjoy the arrival of early autumn weather that's coming for much of the eastern United States. Weather in 5, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. So, tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, obviously we'll be looking at the tropics. We'll be looking at the latest on Fiona. We will be looking at what's going on with the tropical wave. We might give a glancing mention to Gaston and a couple of other tropical waves that could potentially develop down the road. What happened to the inactive hurricane season we were going to have? What happened to that? That's coming up tonight at 7:30 Eastern.